Hello, everyone. I'm Karen Ellis, the Director of College Advising for Pali High. Welcome to all of you for joining us tonight. We have two great presenters that will be presenting on something many of our students can benefit from. They will be talking about applying to performing arts programs and giving an overview of the differences between a BA and a BFA program, and also a spotlight on film school applications. So we have our two presenters tonight. Both are college counselors from Great Expectations. The first presenter will be Heather Strauss. Heather has worked as an admissions counselor and an alumni interviewer at a top 10 university and as an application reader for the UC system. As a college counselor, she has helped many students gain admission to studio art, film, and theater programs, in addition to non-arts related tracks. She's also received a BA in theater herself from Northwestern University and currently works as an actor in LA. Our second presenter is Chalise Belmont. In her 15 years as an independent college counselor, Chalise has helped students to prepare applications, compile portfolios, and write personal statements that have gotten them into Ivy Leagues, the UC system, Big Ten schools, public and private universities, and graduate and doctorate and doctoral programs. She has also received her MFA in theater from the Actors Studio Drama School and has worked as a producer, a director, a writer, and actress on numerous award-winning independent films. So I will be out of the picture for the rest of the webinar, and I will let Heather and Chalise give you their take on what you should be doing if you're planning on applying to performing arts programs.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen, for that introduction. One little housekeeping thing before we get started, if everyone can direct their questions to the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom. We will answer questions at the end of the presentation, so you can put them there and we'll answer them at the end. But without further ado, we will get started and talk about, I'm going to start talking about the difference between BA and BFA programs. Now, for students who want to apply to the performing arts, this is sort of the first question that I ask them, is whether they're interested in a BA or a BFA. And oftentimes they're not exactly sure what that means. They might know the terms, but they might not be aware of what that means practically for their college experience. So we're going to dive into that. Now, the first thing to keep in mind with the difference between BA and BFA, and remember, this applies to all performing arts and arts related majors. So this can apply to film, theater, dance, studio art. This really can apply to any of those more artistic majors. But the thing to know here is that a BFA program, a Bachelor of Fine Arts, you're typically spending at least 50% of your class time within that program, required to. And it can be up to 70 to 80% of your class time, depending on the program and the school that you're attending. Whereas with a BA program, you're typically spending about a third of your time, which is more similar to a typical college major. You're spending about a third of your time in that program, and then you can take classes outside of it. So what that means for your college experience, if you're really excited to dive deep into that art, whether it's film, theater, dance, etc., if you're really excited to take really a majority of your classes in that program, you might be excited by the idea of a BFA, where you really get to dive deep and you won't necessarily have to take many general education requirements or outside electives or things like that. However, if you're a student who's really excited about double majoring or minoring or taking classes that they're just interested in outside of their major, taking a random art history class or a psychology class, you're not going to have as much time to explore in that way if you're taking a BFA program, and a BA program might be a better fit for you. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The next thing is that with a BA and BFA program, we can go to the next slide, Shalise. The next thing with a BFA and BA program is that for a BFA, you're really required to select a track for a lot of these programs. So you're not going to be necessarily studying theater, but you would be studying acting. You wouldn't be studying film, but you might be studying directing. And you have a track associated with the specific skill that you want to acquire, which also means that for a BFA program, oftentimes your classes are more predetermined. There is a sequence or a list of requirements that you need to get through in order to be sort of certified in that skill. And you're going to be, taking most of your classes within that one concentration that you're excited about. On the other hand, a BA program, you're often taking film, theater, studio art, which is more broad. And for example, I was a BA theater major at Northwestern, so I took classes in directing, in playwriting, and that was all sort of part of my theater degree. I did complete an acting sequence, and I was able to, get that acting training that I desired, but I was not required to. It was an option. So there's sometimes ways to still concentrate within what you want to do, but it's more elective rather than required in that degree. So that gives you more freedom to sort of choose your classes and decide what sort of avenue of that art you want to explore. Again, whereas that BFA program, it's a little bit more predetermined. There's a little bit more of a track that you have to follow. And then moving on to sort of the types of schools. So one thing to look at here is there's a couple different types of universities and colleges that you can attend to obtain these majors. So there's that conservatory, and I have an example up here of Juilliard, the conservatory that is fully dedicated to the arts. That is what they offer. All of the majors and degrees are sort of within that within the arts, and it's a very intense, very rigorous program. And that sort of also is going to determine how much you get to do outside of the arts. Juilliard's not going to be the kind of school where you get to go root for their football team. You're not going to be able to necessarily join the school newspaper. There's not going to be that same sense of a college experience in that way. So for a student that's really excited to spend their full college experience really immersed in their art, a conservatory might be the right program for them. Then there's this sort of middle ground. There's conservatories that are within larger universities. So I have the example up here of the University of Michigan, which has a really top-notch conservatory musical theater program, for example. They have a conservatory-style training. It is a BFA program. However, it is housed in the larger University of Michigan. So while you'll still have a lot of requirements and time commitments related to that BFA that you're obtaining, you still also get to sort of, root for the football team and explore that sort of college life that is present at the University of Michigan. You sort of get the best of both worlds in that way. And then there are, just a major within a university or liberal arts college that is the same as any other major would be at that school. You're focused on that, and this is often more BA focused. With the conservatories within universities, there's often BA or BFA options. So that can be either, depending on what way you want to go. But then with the major within the University or Liberal Arts College, you can go to a school that has a really strong major in theater or dance or anything, but it's not a conservatory. It is just one of many programs and many majors within that university. So that sort of allows you to study the skill or the thing that you want to study or the art that you want to study, but also have that, you know, true college experience that people talk about. So it sort of depends on what you're looking for, whether you really want to be engrossed in your art and spending so much of your time dedicated to it, or you really want to sort of experience that college life and do activities outside of it. Now, with these different programs, it's going to affect the admissions expectations. Clearly, since they're such different degrees, it's going to affect, you know, what they're looking for in their applicants. So for a BFA program, you know, for acting or directing or things like that, the audition or portfolio or whatever more artistic part of the application is going to hold a lot of weight. And students that are really talented in their specific skill, but may not have the same academic caliber, they're going to still really weigh that talent and that audition or portfolio much more heavily, because that's what they're looking for you as a student, because you're going to be spending the majority of your time dedicated to that art and dedicated to that skill. So they want, that's what they're mostly concerned with. However, on the other side, if you're looking at a BA program, they're going to be evaluating you pretty much the same as any student at the university. Yes, there might be an artistic supplement or a you know, you're going to list your art on your activities list, or you might write an essay about it, and they'll take that into consideration. But your academic factors and your test scores and all of the other parts of the application are going to still be weighed just as heavily as it would for another applicant. Now, one thing sort of to think as well about, you know, what these mean for your future, sort of looking towards the next step. Obviously, everyone wants, you know, that Oscar, Tony, Grammy, you know, how are you going to get to that eventual career if that's what you're dreaming about? And one thing also to think about with these BFA, BA programs, things like showcases, you know, for acting students. Sometimes BFA programs will take their students and they will travel to LA and New York and do showcases that really sort of help students launch their career. They meet managers and agents and casting directors, and they sort of have the resources to help you get to the next step. Oftentimes BA programs won't have this. It depends on the program. As I mentioned, I went to Northwestern and they did have actually a showcase. They had one in Chicago that everyone was welcome to do, and they had one in New York that was only a small subsection of the class. So that is, you know, a unique situation there. But it's just something to keep in mind in terms of if you're looking to really launch your career after college, or if you're pursuing this art, thinking about what their resources are for helping you get to that next step. Similarly, alumni networks and things like that can make a big difference. You know, if you're studying theater or film at a very small liberal arts school, and even if you have great training, but they don't have a huge alumni network because they only have 10 or so film majors every year, it's a different situation than one of those big conservatories that's sort of what they do and what all the students are focused on. And it'll just affect sort of your next step. And then lastly, the adaptability of the degree. So one thing to keep in mind is that the BFA is in a sense really certifying you in that skill. You are still probably going to take some general education classes and electives and all of that, but generally it's certifying your skill in that art. Whereas for the BA, it's similar to a more similar to a normal degree where you're taking lots of general educations, you're taking lots of electives or double majors or minors. So if you aren't sure what you want to do after college, that can sometimes be a little bit more adaptable to a different area down the line, or a different career change or career path, because it can sort of open up different opportunities because you did take, you had to take math and science and whatever else. So it just sort of shows that a little bit more. So that's sort of an overview of the general BA, BFA degree process. And again, this applies to all different kinds of arts majors. And then I'm going to toss it over to my colleague Shalise to talk specifically about the film school process.
Okay, that was great, Heather. Thank you. So getting specifically into film school. So if you have a student who says, I want to study film, or I want to be a filmmaker, and that's pretty broad. So there's a lot of different things you can study in film school. This isn't a comprehensive list, but among the things that a student might choose to study in film school would be things, of course, like directing, film and TV production, which is sometimes a broader label under which students will study kind of various parts of the film and TV production career path. Screenwriting, creative producing, animation and digital arts, visual effects, film and media studies. Film is such a broad umbrella under which so many different parts of the industry fit. Some students know what they want to do. They know they want to direct, or they think they know they want to direct. Everybody wants to be a director. And then they get in, and sometimes they find that they, love cinematography, or some students know right away that they want to study cinematography. And I told you this list wasn't comprehensive. That's another thing. Usually that falls under film and TV production. So various film programs will have different offerings within the blanket, under the blanket of film. For instance, creative producing isn't offered at all schools. Some schools have very specific programs in that. So it just kind of depends what your student is interested in, and kind of finding the programs that offer that. Some are more general and some are really specific. One thing to note as you and your child start looking at this stuff is making sure that you know the difference between film production and film studies. At some school, these are almost interchangeable. Sometimes film studies has a production element. So in that major, they're going to teach you about, lighting and cameras and directing, and they're going to allow students to actually make films and get on sound stages and work with equipment, and that's part of their major. In some schools that's film production, and in some schools that is actually film studies. When you start looking at a college list, you start looking at schools where you and your student want for her to apply, you're going to want to look at the course curriculum and make sure that the major that the student is interested in actually offers the things that they want to do in college. So if they are production oriented and a film program is called film studies, you just want to make sure that that's in there. Otherwise, it might be more theoretical. So a film studies major that doesn't have a production element might be interesting to a student who wants to do film theory, or film critiques and criticism, things like that, film history. So again, under film, there's such a broad range of topics. And just when you're looking at programs, you just really want to make sure that the course offerings match what your goals are and what you want to learn in school. So this is the big part, right? Film school applications, they do differ a little bit. When you're doing film studies and doesn't have a production element, sometimes it won't have as many components to its portfolio, but sometimes it will still have some as well. So I really want to cover this in detail, because this is where, when you or your student start saying film school as a potential for college, these are the things you're going to want to consider. So the very first thing, of course, is there are often going to be earlier deadlines. So that means that if you start hearing about everyone talking about the hustle of college, a lot of times the deadlines will be in January. But for film school, sometimes they can be as early as November 1st. Chapman University, which is one of the schools here in Los Angeles area that has a very good film department, for instance, their application deadline for all film school applicants is November 1st. Otherwise, you're not considered. That can sometimes be missed in the application process. So it's really, really important that parents and students know the deadlines for these schools, and just be aware that a lot of times they are earlier. Some are November 1st, some are December 1st. The UCs, like UCLA, is November 30th. And so you just want to make sure and know that a lot of these are earlier. The other big part of this is that in addition to your normal application. So if you think about college applications, you think about the actual application itself, your personal statement, your letters of recommendation, your transcripts, right? Normal things that you think about with college. Film school applications very, very often have some sort of portfolio or creative supplement in addition to the application. So that means a little bit more work. What these include depends on what your major is going to be. So if you're going to do screenwriting versus directing versus creative producing, those kinds of things, animation, all those things that were listed on my first slide. And then also, just in terms of if you're, sorry, I lost my train of thought. There's an airplane. So in terms of the portfolio, things that could be included are, if you're going to be a director, for instance, short films, right? Sometimes photography. So seeing how a student thinks and how they visualize the world. If you're going to be a screenwriter, of course, there's going to be much more demand put on short scenes, short stories, a dialogue between two characters on a given theme, maybe even some reflective writing that shows kind of what your voice is and what your perspective is on the world. Treatments, so sometimes they'll ask for, even though students may not know what a treatment is, they'll say, give us a 2-page film treatment on a feature film idea that you have. So these are really great things that are preparing the student for entrance into film school, but you also have to start thinking about, okay, what do these things mean and how do I get them together for my application? They want to see how you think, what your creative perspective is, how you view the world through the lens of film. Right? So a lot of these things you'll want to think in a very visual way. You'll want to be able to speak about angles and lighting and directing choices and acting choices and all of those things. That's what's in the creative portfolio. Other things that can be in there, again, it depends on the school, additional essays. So film critiques, they might say, write a critique of a film of your choosing and really break down for us what you think works in this film, what doesn't work. And they really want to see how you think about it. Additionally, many of the programs have some sort of artistic statement. Now, this is in addition to the personal statement that you're going to have to write for your application. So let's take a school like USC, for instance. USC requires that you fill out the entire application for the school itself. So your common application with all of your demographics, your school, your personal statement. USC will also have supplemental essays for their school, which will be, why do you want to come to USC? They'll ask you a couple other short questions that you'll have to answer. And then on top of that, if you apply to the film school, they might ask you for an artistic statement, which is very specifically geared towards why you want to study film, what your goals are, what you've done to this point. So it's very different than what you might write for a personal statement. It can get complicated when, for instance, film is your love and passion, it's all you do. How do you write something for your personal statement and something for your artistic statement? And that's where you want to think and make sure you're not repeating yourself so that the school will get a really full picture of who you are, that doesn't, kind of go into the same territory while still being, showing who you are as a full person. So that can be a little complicated, but just to know those are in there. Another thing that is often asked for is a creative resume. And this can scare students a little bit because, like the personal statement and the artistic statement, when you fill out the common application or school-specific application, depending on where you're applying to, you'll often be asked to list your activities, but they also will want you to upload an artistic resume. So sometimes there will be a little overlap there. Artistic resumes will often be much more oriented towards the arts and the creative pursuits of the student, as opposed to the activities, which might be more general. And say you're a film student and you also played lacrosse. Well, you're going to put lacrosse on your college application activities, but you're going to leave that off of your artistic resume, obviously. Things that can go on an artistic resume can include any sort of creative endeavor. So if you're applying to film, obviously you're going to start with listing anything that you've done in film. If you've made short films, if you've worked on other people's short films, friends or students' short films, if you've been a video editor, I've seen students do things like sports highlight clips that they've been able to, gain a following on Instagram. So they might put that. Photography, even things like being a part of the drama program or the school musical or the band, anything that's creative. Of course, you're going to want to front load it with the film stuff, but anything that's artistic and that kind of you've done creatively can be fair game to put on an artistic resume. Sometimes students worry because they feel like they don't have a lot to put on that. And, any college counselor or any, mentor figure, the College Center at Pali can help you to kind of navigate what should go on a resume versus what's not. But it's something to really note that if you're interested in applying to film, that's something you're going to want to do. So something to start thinking about. What's going to go on my resume? Do I have enough stuff? And if not, maybe I should start making some stuff. that gets me into some of my big tips, which the biggest thing I can tell a student, if a student says I'm interested in film, the first thing I'm going to say is, great, start making films. It seems really obvious, but it's not. I think that sometimes it seems like a really big, scary thing to make a film, but I have a really secret tip. It's called an iPhone or any sort of smartphone. We have in our pockets the ability to create amazing things nowadays. And a really great short student film can be made with just this thing that we carry in our pockets every day. So if you get nothing else out of this entire webinar, it's just let me empower you to start making films. Sometimes the portfolio requirements can seem overwhelming when it comes to, oh gosh, I haven't made a film, but they can be as simple as a 2-minute short film with no dialogue on a theme. It can be a 5-minute film of your choosing, just a visual sample. It can have dialogue. You can write something, employ your family and friends, make them be in your movie, and take a weekend to shoot it and then edit it on iMovie even. None of this has to cost a lot. None of this has to be overwhelming. If you are interested in film, the most important thing you can do is explore and play around and make films. If you think about, some of the most famous directors in the world, J.J. Abrams and Steven Spielberg, they picked up cameras when they were kids and just pointed at things and started shooting, and they didn't have half the resources we did. So if you have any interest in applying to film programs, you're going to want to show the admissions teams what you're capable of, what the world looks like from your eyes. And the best way to do that is to actually make something. Some schools do offer film production classes and things like that, but even if your school doesn't, that's okay. You can take a weekend and have your own film school, right? You learn by doing, and that's a big part of the film industry. I will tell you, I don't have a film degree, and I've worked in the film world, and I've learned by doing, and it's a really valuable way to learn what to do and what not to do. In terms of going back to the resume and something you can do. So now let's say you've made a film, you are proud of it, you've edited it, you've added some title credits, maybe you've had a friend who works in your audio production class at school, make some music for it, whatever, you get some stock footage or some YouTube free music, you've got a final film. Well, what can you do with that? Well, number one, you've made a film, so you can use it in your portfolio, which is valuable. Number two, there are tons of student film festivals that you could submit that film to. So then if it starts getting into some festivals, you have maybe a chance to win some awards, or even just to be selected is something else that you can add to your artistic resume, which is fantastic. So just because you make a film, that's not where the journey ends. Then you can submit it to competitions, you can make more films. There's so many ways to beef up that resume that shows a demonstrated interest in this thing that you're going to apply to. Another tip I have, and it's really kind of goes with everything we've said so far, is to really research what every school requires. Because as you saw on the slide before, there's a lot of different requirements, but it depends on the school. For instance, UCLA has a lot more writing requirements than visual requirements, whereas USC wants 5 minutes of visual work, right? For instance, these could change, but this is what they are currently. Whereas Chapman wants a 2-minute film with no dialogue. So sometimes what you make for Chapman may also work for other schools and vice versa, or you can recut different films that you've made, or there's just every different portfolio requirement varies depending on the school. So start researching what each school requires, even early on in your high school education. Look at what it means to apply to film school and start trying to do things, making films and doing other things that kind of fit with that. And a note on that is, even if it's not your film, if you're not the one directing, help your friends out as well, because another entry on your artistic resume could be you were the sound guy on your friend's film, you were the editor, you were the composer, you were an actor in another person's film. Find your own little film community within your friends and your school, or outside of your school through social media. Find other student filmmakers and just get involved and start learning the ins and outs of the equipment and seeing how other people work and collaborating. All of that can go on a resume. So it's just about being really active and then being really knowledgeable, researching, okay, what's going to be required of me when it comes to senior year? The reason I say that is you don't want to get to senior year and all of a sudden it's September, October, and you're like, I want to apply to film school. And now you're looking up the requirements and you're going, oh my gosh, I have to make 3 films and I have to have an artistic statement and I have to write all these essays. You just want to start early. So I usually tell kids, especially, if I'm only meeting students maybe the summer before their senior year, we start really early. We start working on our personal statements, maybe right after school gets out, and we start looking at what the requirements are going to be. And I start telling them, if they haven't made a film, spend your summer, make a film, look at what the requirements are, start getting that portfolio ready. Sometimes they don't have the portfolio stuff out right away, but that's okay. You can still be making films. You can still be beefing up your resume. Then when August 1st hits, and that's when a lot of the schools will drop all of their supplemental essays, their portfolio requirements, that's when the Common App kind of usually populates with all of that information. We've already got a running start. You've already got some portfolios. Maybe you've created a website that's a landing page for all of your amazing films and your photography, and maybe an About Me section. That's another thing that students might do that they add to their resumes and portfolios, is like a website they've created. There's just so many ways to show admissions that you're a creative person who has something to add to the program. So those are the kind of steps you can take. It starts whether you're watching this as a freshman or you're watching this as a senior. Hopefully you're already well on your way in this process. But at any point in high school, if you start thinking, I want to do film, these are the things that'll really make you stand out as an applicant. You want to have, the most time you can to really develop your voice and to show who you are in your visual style. A little tip, just so you know, there are on YouTube, you can find former film school applicants who have posted their film submissions online. So I would warn not to copy those, because we want to hear your original voice. But if you want to kind of see what other students have done in the past that have gotten them in, that's a resource that I kind of direct students to, just to kind of glean some inspiration and to see the variety of things that are submitted to these programs that are very valid in terms of visual samples. So of course, you want to study film, you're going to have some sort of visual sample. If you need some guidance on that, number one, you can work with the college counselor, you can talk to the college center, or you can start doing some of that research online and empowering yourself. So that's kind of the overview of the film application process. It's not meant to be overwhelming. It's just meant to kind of empower you to say, okay, this is going to be a little bit more involved than, for instance, a regular application process, but that shouldn't scare you off. That should just be really exciting, because if you love this and you're pursuing this, it's just an opportunity for you to really, really show what you can bring and how amazing you will be once you get into college and keep studying it in more depth. So I hope that helped.
That is sort of the main part of our presentation, and we're always available if you need any help. If you want some more information that's more specific to your family, we do offer free 30-minute consultations with our founder, Jen Kafish. You can also go to the Pali College Center and talk to Karen or some of the other great people that work there and get some more individual advice. But before we send you off to do all of that, we're also open for questions now, and you can direct them to the Q&A in the chat.
There is a question. I don't know if this is for Shalice or Heather. Someone's asking to repeat the website for reviewing and seeing sample essays.
Oh, for sample essays?
It says sample essays. I'm not sure if it's more of the sample submissions.
For sample essays, I always direct people to the Johns Hopkins Essays That Work. That's not specific to film, but that's just for personal statements. That can be a really helpful place, because Johns Hopkins is so gracious that they release essays every year that students have submitted that have gotten them in, and they have admissions people actually write like a few little notes on like why they like the essay and why it was a successful essay. So that for sample essays is an amazing place to go look. In terms of sample films, I just go on YouTube, because a lot of students are really gracious about, once they've been accepted, they'll upload their film and say, this is a film I submitted for film school. I got in here, here, here. I was rejected here and here. So they'll be like, film school submission, LMU, USC, UCLA, and they might write that in the title. But if you just go on YouTube, you can actually find a lot of very generous students who've shared their work. But again, I warn you, don't use it as trying to emulate it. I just say use it as inspiration to go, wow, there's so many ways I can do this and create my own film that's unique to me, because they've already seen that person's film. They want to see what you bring. But if you're just looking for inspiration, YouTube has a lot, and you can just search film school, portfolio submissions and things like that. You can, get really savvy with your searches, but you can find them online for sure.
One other thing, and I know, Shalice is the film aficionado here, but one other thing to think about is she mentioned the student film festivals and student categories in film festivals. So if you're interested in film, go watch them. They have a ton of film festivals, especially nowadays, that are online and are not that expensive, or you don't have to travel or anything. You could buy, you know, a $10 full 3-day pass or whatever it is, and watch a bunch of films that students have made around the country and that have been selected for these festivals. So that's another great thing to do.
And they often, if you buy a festival pass to any of these, and they do have usually student rates and things like that, they also have panels. So if you're looking to learn from professionals, you can also attend panels, especially virtually. But you know, if you go in person, a lot of times your tickets, if you buy a pass, will also include panels and things like that. So that's another way to start learning from filmmakers and hearing them speak about it, and just very inspiring a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then we have another question that says, regarding the UCLA supplemental app, the essay answers should be totally different than the Common App. In other words, can some of the essay answers be in the same Common App and then the UC system?
I think so the UC is not on the Common App, it's on its own UC app, which is a very common confusion because most schools are on the Common App. The UC has its own application, and they do have 4 personal insight questions. It's a great question. And then they also have the theater, film, and television supplemental. The questions are quite different. I would not use the answers from your personal insight questions verbatim for the TFT application. But I also think you're not going to cover a lot of the same territory based on what's asked between the two. The TFT, the television film, the theater, film, and television supplement is very specific to the arts, and often asks you for film critiques and some writing samples and things like that. So there won't be, in my experience, there hasn't been a lot of crossover between the two.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions?
I'll just add a note on that one. Just generally, I mean, Heather, tell me if you disagree, but generally, if you have a school application and a supplemental, you really want to try to not repeat yourself. Sometimes you'll hit the same topic. For instance, I work with music students as well. And sometimes my music students really want to write in their personal statement about music, and then they also have to write an artistic statement. They might write about music in both, for instance, or I might have a film student write about film in both, but as long as we're covering different parts of that passion, it's okay. I just don't want anything verbatim across the board, unless you are looking at a program that specifically says, we will not look at the Common App, so feel free to use it here, but for the main personal statement. But for the most part, you really don't want to repeat and use the same ones. The strategic way to reuse essays would be to, for instance, if you write a supplement for USC that also would then fit maybe University of Michigan, maybe they both deal with the community, that would be an okay way to kind of use the same essay because they're not going to the same schools. But if for the same school, I like to use different pieces of writing across the application if possible.
Is that it, Lorraine?
I think that's it. It looks like you answered. The other question was, so UCLA will not see the Common App, but it sounds like you answered that. So
yeah, they are on the UC application, so it's totally separate. Yeah, they don't see the Common App at all.
So anything you write for the Common App, you can use for the UCs. That's fair game. It's another way to double dip.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone. If there aren't any more questions, but we've really enjoyed having you all here. And you know, if you ever need any resources, feel free to reach out.